Rain washes the dirt from grey bones. Torche is finally found. This book builds empathy, helps you spot lies, and gives you great stories to tell. Watch my summary now and go read the book.
The air in the ballroom it's incredibly heavy.
Yeah, suffocating, really.
Right, it's that kind of thick, just suffocating atmosphere that settles in right after a massive crowd has dispersed.
Like they've left all the heat of their bodies behind.
Exactly, the heat and just the wreckage of their excess. And it smells intensely of expensive Dom Perignon.
Sweet and yeasty.
Yeah, almost rotting in its richness. But that scent it's mixing sickeningly with something else. Very violent. It's this metallic, sharp, just undeniable scent of heavy rain and ozone.
Bleeding in through those drafty, rattling window panes.
And in the exact center of this massive, suddenly empty room, there's a fountain.
Nearly 8 feet tall.
8 feet tall, sculpted entirely, impossibly, of ice. And it's weeping.
Just weeping.
The oppressive heat of the room from the crush of the hundreds of bodies that were just dancing and sweating, it's causing the ice to surrender.
But it isn't a collapse.
No, it's an agonizingly slow deterioration. Drop by drop, it just melts. The water slides down the slick, freezing curves of the sculpture.
Pooling at the base.
Right, pooling at the base and draining into these incredibly complex hidden pipes.
They actually hired local engineering students.
Meticulously drilling drainage pipes directly into priceless mahogany floorboards.
A staggering display of wealth.
Just destroying a historic floor for a temporary party trick. And as the ice bleeds away, as the outer layers just slew off into the hidden drains, crystal letters slowly begin to reveal themselves.
From deep within the frozen monolith.
They're carved into the core, waiting for the melt to expose them.
Yeah.
Oh.
Oh, yeah.
R.
Yeah.
Esars. A marvel locked within a marvel, slowly and inevitably melting into a useless puddle on the floor.
And if you step out of the ballroom.
Out into the massive hall, the oppressive grandeur of Cliffhaven Estate is actively being violated.
There's a gritty, visceral friction happening on the floorboards.
Slick red clay. The kind of dense, suffocating mud that only forms when a cliffside is actively dissolving under a torrential downpour.
It's being carried in.
Caked on the soles of incredibly expensive leather shoes and heavy riding boots, tracked mercilessly across the polished wood.
Leaving these wet, dragging smears.
And in the dim light, they look exactly like blood. It is the visual evidence of a disaster moving in agonizingly slow motion.
Frozen in amber.
Exactly. Capturing the quiet, sickening decay right before the chaos fully irrevocably erupts, because outside the darkness is absolute,
Suffocate.
impenetrable blackness until it isn't. A terrifying strobe-like flash of lightning violently illuminates the cliffside.
The thunder hasn't even hit yet.
But the flash burns an image into the retina, and there, clinging precariously, just impossibly to the sheer rock face, is a rickety 5-story wooden staircase.
Swaying in the gale.
You can almost hear the structural groan of it. The wood is rotting. It's tired of standing up straight against decades of salt and wind.
The rain beats against it.
With an aggressive, punishing rhythm,
Yeah.
slicking the timber, making every single step a lethal gamble. It is the night of August 28, 1982.
It is the night the entire facade shatters. The night the foundation finally gives way.
For you, listening right now, the mission of this deep dive is to look at the scattered wreckage of that night and piece together the anatomy of a tragedy.
We are looking at the source material, Elizabeth Klehfoth's The Lost Heiress.
And we are placing the Towers family dynasty under a microscope. We are going to look at the psychological manipulations, the sheer hostility of the environment they built their lives upon, and the deeply buried secrets.
Festering from the clouded nursery rooms of the 1940s.
All the way to the present-day discovery of graying bones, meticulously laid out on blue tarps in the estate's garden. This isn't just a missing person case.
No, it's an autopsy.
An autopsy of generational wealth, of unchecked hubris, and of power. And frankly, looking at the evidence laid out in this text, the Towers family is not a victim of some cosmic, unavoidable circumstance.
Right.
They are a dynasty that meticulously, arrogantly, and deliberately engineered their own downfall. They earned every bit of the ruin that came for them.
I have to disagree with that framing.
I mean, take Senator Ransom Towers. The man operates with the calculated, bloodless precision of a sociopath. He cloaks his absolute need for control in the noble-sounding language of civic duty.
You're ignoring the immense pressure he was under.
And the housekeeper, Florence Talbot, she isn't a caretaker. She is a cold-blooded manipulator. She took the very concept of love and weaponized it,
That's entirely too harsh.
turning it into a suffocating, lethal instrument of total possession.
You are looking at the final, tragic outcome without understanding the origin of the disease. You can't just label Florence Talbot a monster and move on.
I think her actions speak for themselves.
It ignores the entire context of her existence. She is a profoundly tragic figure, entirely molded by severe early trauma. She was shaped by the brutal, unforgiving mechanics of class survival.
Survival shouldn't excuse double homicide.
In an era that offered her absolutely no agency and no safety net, she did what cornered people do. She survived. And so Wars, the girl at the center of this incredible storm, wasn't destroyed by a sociopathic brother or an evil nanny.
She was literally kept prisoner by them.
She was a helpless victim of her era, and more importantly, her bloodline. What you are calling a well-deserved downfall, what the public likes to call the supposed powers curse, is actually just the crushing, inescapable weight of class expectations.
Class expectations.
Yes, the sheer psychological impossibility of surviving the gravity of the tower's name. It crushes everyone who tries to carry it.
But the name itself was built to be carried like a weapon. We have to look at what it actually means to be a Towers. We are talking about a true American Gothic dynasty.
The text explicitly places them alongside the Kennedys and the Roosevelts.
And that comparison is vital. This isn't just a family with money, it's a legacy of public servants deeply, inextricably entwined with the history of the nation itself.
Right, like Arthur James Towers leading the Bear Flag Revolt.
Literally raising the grizzly bear flag before California was even officially a state. Remington Towers pushing political levers for the creation of Yosemite National Park.
Augustus Towers rubbing shoulders with President Harry S. Truman.
Sitting in rooms where the foundations of the United Nations were being drafted. Charles Towers, instrumental in the political maneuvering behind the Civil Rights Act of 1964.
They are a massive historical shadow.
Mayors, congressmen, senators, men who shaped the reality of millions of people. We aren't endorsing their politics either way, we're just impartially reporting their footprint. But a public legacy of that magnitude requires a private fortress.
It requires a place where the gods can retreat.
Exactly. Cliffhaven. It sits on 100 prime acres of the Central Coast. But if you actually look at the architecture of the place, if you examine the psychology of the space they created, it does not function as a home.
It's too cold, too vast.
It functions as a panopticon. It's a prison designed to keep the world out and to keep its inhabitants perfectly contained. Look at that staircase we talked about in the intro.
The one Doris Oppenheimer Towers built?
The Boston heiress who married Remington. She had that massive 5-story wooden staircase built down the treacherous cliff face. Why? Not because she loved the ocean.
No, it was entirely about asserting dominance over the landscape.
She had it built simply because she felt it was a personal travesty to own coastal land and not have direct private beach access. She threw unimaginable wealth at a terrifying engineering problem just to bend the landscape to her whim.
And what happened once it was built?
She walked down it once. She took off her shoes, touched the sand with her bare feet, turned around, walked back up the 5 stories, and never used it again.
That is just incredible.
The staircase wasn't about the enjoyment of nature. It wasn't about a connection to the earth. It was about possession. It was a monument to her ability to force the earth to yield.
But that desperate need for possession, that need to dominate the landscape, it's entirely reactive to the environment they chose to build on.
How so?
The atmosphere of Cliffhaven isn't just a backdrop. It acts as a character in its own right. And it exhibits a profound, relentless environmental hostility.
The weather is definitely brutal in the book.
Right, think about how we typically picture the California coast for you listening. We associate it with warmth, golden sunshine, an idyllic, easy paradise.
Yeah, postcards.
But here, the text completely subverts that expectation. The coast is rendered in a brutish, unforgiving shade of gray. The weather isn't just bad, it's a violent adversary.
We see descriptions of storms pulling multi-million-dollar homes entirely off their foundations.
18-foot waves in Malibu literally biting massive chunks off the Santa Monica Pier.
And at Cliffhaven, the relentless punishing rains erode the clay-like soil directly beneath the east wing of the house.
There's a direct, undeniable connection between this violent, unstable geology and the internal decay of the family. It's the perfect metaphor, but it's also a literal reality.
They're built on mud, essentially.
The house is built on shifting, eroding earth. The environment mirrors the precariousness of their dynasty. They are constantly, exhaustingly fighting to fortify a foundation that nature and time is absolutely determined to drag down into the sea.
And you can't build a fortress on a crumbling cliff and not expect the people inside to become paranoid and defensive.
Exactly.
But when that foundation inevitably cracks, when the reality of their precarious position catches up with them, they don't take responsibility. They blame the quote-unquote curse.
The Towers family curse.
This is a recurring theme we really have to dig into. They talk about it in hushed tones, as if they are the victims of Greek tragedy. Great Uncle Sebastian drowning in the bizarre, horrific molasses flood in Keeney Square in Boston in 1919.
The sudden plane crash off the coast of Catalina that took Charles and Bertie.
The catastrophic skiing accident that killed Theo. But if you look closely at these events, I challenge you to see this curse for what it really is. It's a myth.
It's not just a myth, it's a pattern.
It is a convenient narrative invented by the elite to excuse their own reckless hubris. When you have limitless resources, you don't live like normal people. You push limits because you believe consequences are for the lower classes.
That's a huge generalization.
You fly private planes in questionable weather. You ski aggressively on dangerous, out-of-bounds slopes. Look at Sowers herself at 12 years old. A 12-year-old child.
She was acting out.
She takes the family boat out into the ocean, entirely alone, and crashes it directly into the jagged crags off Catalina Island. It's a miracle she isn't killed.
It was a cry for help.
And when the Coast Guard finally locates her, what is she doing? She is sitting on a buoy, calmly eating caviar and crackers she packed for the trip.
She was in shock.
Remarking to her rescuers on the lovely weather, that isn't a curse. That is the insulated, consequence-free reality of the ultra-wealthy finally catching up with them. It's arrogance, pure and simple.
It is entirely too simplistic to just write it all off as hubris. Yes, the wealth insulates them, but the curse is the manifestation of the psychological rot inherent in the dynasty itself.
Psychological rot from having too much money.
From the absolute impossibility of surviving the sheer weight of the tower's name. When your name is synonymous with historical greatness, you aren't allowed to just be a person. You're an institution.
Sure, the pressure is high.
And it creates an environment where genuine human connection, the kind of messy, vulnerable connection that actually sustains a human life, is completely overridden by a sense of duty, by optics, by the desperate need to maintain the facade.
Okay, I'll give you that the facade is exhausting.
And you cannot examine this psychological rot, this curse, without looking at the ecosystem that supports it. You have to look at the deep, unbridgeable divide between the help and the royalty at Cliffhaven.
Right.
The wealth doesn't exist in a vacuum. It requires a massive underclass to maintain it. Consider the sheer brutality of Florence's origin story.
It is grim.
Her mother wasn't just poor, she was a scullery maid in the very house Florence would later run. Her mother goes into labor while physically stacking heavy jars of peach preserves in the damp, freezing cellar of the estate.
Unimaginable conditions.
She later dies of tuberculosis, a disease exacerbated by the very conditions she worked in. Florence is left completely destitute, an orphan at 6 years old.
Yeah, that's a rough start.
Think about the staggering contrast. The royalty lives in the light-shaping world events, dining with presidents, while the help quite literally dies in the dark, preserving the fruits of the estate so the wealthy can have sweet jams in the dead of winter.
The disparity is sickening, yes.
The curse isn't just about the Towers family doing dangerous things. It's the toxic, inevitable byproduct of this parasitic ecosystem. The house consumes the people who serve it.
That ecosystem, that stark divide, is laid bare through the way the narrative structures time. The story doesn't just unfold linearly. It forces us into a fractured timeline.
Constantly jumping back and forth.
We are violently pulled between the present-day investigation, the chaotic night of the storm in 1982, and the deep foundational past of the 1940s and 50s.
It's disorienting but necessary.
Let's look at 1948, because it perfectly illustrates your point about the help and the royalty. Florence, a 6-year-old orphan, arrives before Doris Oppenheimer Towers for inspection.
It's not an adoption.
No, it's an acquisition. She is brought in wearing an oversized, unwashed hand-me-down dress with literal grit under her fingernails. And where do they put her? She is placed into the nursery.
But it's not just a regular room.
It's painted baby blue with massive billowy clouds on the ceiling. There is a 3-story pink dollhouse sitting in the corner, populated by a family of wooden dolls that represent the exact family she is now legally bound to serve.
It's so twisted.
This fractured chronology is brilliant because it shows us exactly how Florence's twisted loyalties were forged over decades. She was dropped into this extravagant, surreal wonderland.
A gilded cage.
But the cruelest part is that she was allowed to live in it, she was allowed to clean it and maintain it, but she was never, ever truly allowed to belong to it.
Right. She's in a psychological liminal space. Think of it like being the backstage crew at a massive Broadway show.
That's a good analogy.
You live in the theater, you know every single line of the play by heart. You literally pull the ropes that make the magic happen on stage, but you are never, ever allowed to step into the spotlight or take a bow.
Essential, but invisible.
Exactly. And this brings up what we can call the nanny's paradox. Florence evolves from this unwanted, destitute outsider, the girl with grit under her nails, into the stalwart captain of Cliffhaven.
She essentially runs the entire estate eventually.
And she achieves this omnipotence through silent, relentless observation. She knows every secret because she washes the sheets and empties the trash.
Information is power.
When Heiress is born, the dynamic shifts dramatically. Florence becomes this child's entire world. We see her stitching Heiress's baby blanket until her own fingers bleed and the threads are worn bare.
Dedicated, sure.
We see her holding Heiress through endless, agonizing nights of colic, walking the floorboards when the infant will scream bloody murder if anyone else, including her own mother, tries to touch her.
But that's part of the job, right?
This is the paradox of maternal love when it exists within the rigid confines of servitude. Florence's love for Heiress is undeniably genuine. It is profound. And in those early years, it is literally life-saving for that neglected child.
I don't deny she kept the kid alive.
But, and this is the tragedy, because Florence possesses absolutely no legal or social agency, because she is an employee who could be fired and cast out into the street on a whim, her love begins to mutate.
Mutate is the right word.
It twists into absolute desperate control. She is terrified of losing the only family she's ever known. Every action she takes is born out of a deep, trauma-induced need to protect her position in the house.
Protect her position, exactly, not the child.
And to protect her surrogate child from a world that Florence knows firsthand is brutal and unforgiving.
I hear what you're saying about her lack of legal standing, but I just don't buy that it remains love. I look at her actions and it looks exactly like pathological possession.
She was fiercely protective.
Florence acts as a jailer. Look at the elaborate, monstrous medical falsehood they spin around Heiress as she gets older. The family suddenly claims that teenage Heiress has long QT syndrome.
A highly dangerous, unpredictable heart arrhythmia.
Which she doesn't actually have. They use this fake diagnosis to justify abruptly pulling her out of her elite boarding school, isolating her from all her peers, and confining her entirely to the grounds of Cliffhaven.
It was Ransom's idea, mostly.
And Florence.
Oh.
Florence doesn't just go along with it, she quietly and meticulously allows this myth to persist. She polices Heiress's every movement. She dictates her diet. She watches her every interaction.
Because she's following orders.
She ensures the boundaries of the estate are never breached. That isn't a mother protecting a cub. That is a warden ensuring the prisoner never figures out the cell door is actually unlocked.
You're removing all nuance.
Florence weaponizes the concept of care. She uses the language of protection to maintain her own relevance and power within the dynasty. If Heiress is sick and helpless, Florence is indispensable.
But you're judging her from the outside, ignoring the sheer lack of options available to a woman in her precise position in that era. Everyone at Cliffhaven is playing a role.
Some roles are more malicious than others.
They are all just surviving within a rigid, suffocating structure that predates them by generations. Florence plays the warden because if she doesn't, she loses everything.
It's still a choice to play warden.
And this idea of playing roles actually mirrors another fascinating psychological thread in the text, the psychology of imposter syndrome.
Oh, with Elena.
Yes, we see this brilliantly explored through the character of Elena, who assumes the false identity of Ana Rojas to infiltrate Cliffhaven as a caretaker in 1982.
Right, she goes undercover.
Elena steps into this world and is immediately suffocated by the unimaginable wealth. She's taking afternoon tea at the Peninsula Hotel, eating delicate cucumber sandwiches off elderflower china.
And feeling completely out of place.
And all she can feel is the acute, burning disparity between her cheap, off-the-rack JCPenney skirt and the effortless, bespoke world of the towers.
It's intense class anxiety.
But her imposter syndrome isn't just about class anxiety. It's about uncovering a buried truth. She is there under false pretenses, desperately searching for answers about her friend Rosie.
a maid who mysteriously drowned on the tower's yacht back in 1978.
Elena's entire presence highlights the overarching theme of facades. Everyone in this orbit is pretending. The towers project an image of noble public service and refined elegance while hiding deep, private rot.
And Elena projects the image of a compliant caretaker.
While actually operating as an undercover investigator, the imposter syndrome she feels isn't just a personal failing. It's a symptom of existing in an environment where the truth is actively violently suppressed at every turn.
And the person suppressing that truth, the chief architect of all these facades, is Ransom Towers. If we are going to understand the rot of this family, we have to look at the cost of the family name.
He paid a high price, too.
And the terrifying sacrifices Ransom makes at the altar of that legacy. Because there was a time when Ransom had a different dream. He didn't want the Senate seat.
He wanted to be an architect.
And not the kind who builds massive, intimidating monuments to wealth. He specifically wanted to design community centers and churches for small, working-class towns.
Places where people actually lived and breathed.
Places entirely unlike the glossy, cavernous monstrosities of his own world. He wanted a quiet, meaningful life. And he had love, genuine love with a woman named Gabi Martin.
But Gabi was normal.
She wasn't from a dynasty. And the paparazzi, fueled by the family's sheer visibility, cruelly dubbed her the Pippi, mercilessly mocking her normalcy, her lack of pedigree.
The media was brutal to her.
Then his brother Theo dies in that skiing accident. And in that moment, Ransom discards his dream of architecture and he brutally discards Gabi.
Because he had to step up.
He sacrifices his own humanity, his own desires, to put on what he calls the shiny cape of the family name. But let's be very clear about how he uses that cape.
He assumes the burden.
He uses this tragic narrative of sacrifice to justify a terrifying sociopathic control over everyone around him, especially his sister Soares. He decides what is best for her without ever asking for her consent.
He thought he was saving her.
And years later, after she disappears, what does he do? He has her legally declared dead as quickly as possible so that her massive trust fund reverts back to the family, specifically to his control.
He was trying to manage the estate.
He absorbs her wealth into the estate to fund his political ambitions. The cape isn't a burden he bravely shoulders. It's an impenetrable shield that allows him to operate with absolute impunity.
I see what you're saying about the outcome. But interpreting his actions through a lens of pure malice ignores the crushing conditioning of his upbringing.
Indoctrination doesn't excuse his actions.
Ransom isn't a cartoon villain. He genuinely believes he is holding up the sky. Think of him like Atlas. He sacrifices his own happiness, his true love, and his passion for architecture because he has been indoctrinated from birth to believe that the collective legacy of the Towers family is vastly fundamentally more important than his individual desire.
Though he just crushes everyone else in the process.
His control over Soares, while suffocating and ultimately destructive, is born of a desperate, misguided need to protect her from the same chaotic destruction that took the rest of their family.
By locking her up.
He saw the curse take Theo, take his parents. He is trying to lock her in a padded room so she survives. But you are right about the result. This absolute control creates what we can call Soares' psychological void.
It hollowed her out completely.
Because she is kept like a bird in a cage, lied to about her health, and managed rather than loved, Soares harbors a profound, agonizing belief that she is inherently broken, that she is fundamentally unlovable.
She's just desperately wanted a real connection.
She is a young woman desperate for authentic connection, for real love, but she is continually, heartbreakingly betrayed by the very people who were supposed to provide it.
Betrayed doesn't even begin to cover it. Look at the men in her life. Look at William Bass.
Her godfather.
The executor of the family trust. The man who is legally and morally bound to look out for her best interests. Instead, he actively manipulates her finances to prevent her from divesting her shares in his failing company.
He used her.
He views her inheritance as his personal bailout fund. And the emotional manipulation is even worse. He literally lies to her about a necklace, telling her it was a cherished gift of affection from her deceased, emotionally distant mother.
When in reality, Bass bought it himself.
At a jewelry store to manipulate Soares' emotional loyalty, he manufactured a mother's love to secure a business asset. It's disgusting.
And then there's Teddy Mountbatten, her ex-boyfriend.
To the outside world, he presents as the charming, incredibly wealthy peer, the perfect match. But behind closed doors, he is violently, unpredictably jealous.
That scene at the New Year's Eve party.
where Ransom walks in and witnesses Teddy physically shaking Swartz, his hands gripping her arms, his face contorted with lethal anger simply because she briefly flirted with someone else across the room.
Swartz's void isn't just a natural emptiness. It's a crater carved out by men who view her entirely as an asset to be managed, a political pawn, or a prize to be violently possessed.
It's horrific.
Which perfectly illustrates the tragedy of their isolation. Is the true curse of the Cowers family their absolute inability to form genuine human connections?
I'd say yes.
Their wealth insulates them so thoroughly from normal human experience that purely transactional relationships completely replace authentic ones. Everything is a negotiation. Everyone is leverage.
And within this desolate emotional landscape, the help versus royalty dynamic inevitably erupts again. Enter Salvador Santos.
The tutor.
He is hired help, and he crosses the most dangerous, invisible, heavily guarded boundary at Cliffhaven. He sleeps with the royalty. He falls deeply, genuinely in love with Swartz, and she with him.
It was real love.
And crucially, they plan to run away together. They plan to escape the Panopticon. Salvador represents the ultimate existential threat to the established order of the estate.
He isn't just a romance.
He is a disruption of the carefully managed bloodline and the tightly controlled accumulation of wealth. He is a leak in the fortress.
A leak that the family in Florence decides requires extreme, permanent measures to plug. But before we look at what happens to Salvador, to truly understand why the family reacts with such apocalyptic fear to Swartz wanting to run away, we have to take a long, unflinching look at a piece of history hidden deep within the Towers family vault.
Right. This is heavy.
There's a tragic, devastating revelation hidden in the text. Vivian Smith.
Vivi.
She is Ransom and Sozer's older sister.
But you don't see her at the parties.
You don't see her in the family portraits. She was entirely erased from the family tree, hidden away in a remote institution simply because she was born with an intellectual disability.
It's awful.
To grasp the horror of this, we have to look at the reality of the 1940s and 50s. This was an era operating heavily under the long, dark shadow of the American eugenics movement and social Darwinism.
It's important context for you listening to understand the mindset of the time, not to justify it.
Exactly. We're just reporting the historical backdrop. Physical or mental disabilities weren't just medical realities. They were viewed through a lens of profound, world-ending social shame. It was an era where genetic perfection was equated with moral superiority.
Which is terrifying.
Think about the historical reality of the time. We are talking about an era where a sitting president of the United States, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, went to extraordinary, agonizing lengths to hide his use of a wheelchair from the American public.
The press was entirely complicit.
The Secret Service confiscated cameras, all because he was terrified that physical vulnerability would be equated with political weakness.
And the Towers parents operated in that same ruthless, image-obsessed atmosphere.
They literally erased a child from existence to protect a political image.
And the crushing psychological impact of this secret falls squarely on Ransom's shoulders. He is the one tasked with carrying this buried reality, a secret sibling locked in a facility, while simultaneously maintaining the flawless, untouchable public facade of the Towers dynasty.
The hiding of Vivi is the Rosetta Stone for the entire family's behavior. It is the blueprint. It establishes a generational pattern of elaborate, institutionalized lying.
It sets the standard.
It teaches Ransom and Florence a terrifying lesson. If a family has enough money and power to erase a living child, they can erase absolutely anything that threatens their status.
Connect the hiding of Vivi directly to what happens years later with Swartz's secret teenage pregnancy. When Swartz becomes pregnant, the family doesn't rally around her.
They cannot abide the scandal.
It would ruin Ransom's political trajectory. So what do? They fall back on the blueprint. They manufacture the medical falsehood of long QT syndrome.
They cover it up.
They pull her from her school. They sequester her behind the gates of Cliffhaven. They use the unassailable authority of a medical diagnosis to conceal what is actually a desperate cover-up of social shame.
And the tragedy compounds in the dark. Sequestered at the estate, heavily stressed and isolated, Swartz goes into premature labor.
It's one of the hardest parts of the book to read.
She labors in absolute secrecy for a day and a half to deliver a stillborn daughter at just 6 months. Seta Josephine Towers.
Just devastating.
The text describes Swartz holding that silent, blue-hued infant to her chest for hours. She refuses to let the private doctors take the body away. She gives the baby a name. She prays to a God she doesn't even believe in, just begging for a breath.
It is a staggering cruelty.
The family's absolute obsession with image forced a grieving, terrified teenage girl to endure the profound trauma of a stillbirth in absolute, suffocating secrecy, completely cut off from the outside world.
Which brings us back to Salvador and to the absolute mechanical center of this tragedy, the peanut oil murder.
We really need to unpack this carefully.
We have to look at exactly how this happens, step by agonizing step, because it tells us everything about who actually wields the ultimate power in this house. Let's deconstruct the scene in Florence's kitchenette.
It is the night of the 1982 storm.
The wind is howling outside, the rain is battering the glass. Inside, in the small, warm space of her private quarters, Florence, the maternal figure, the stalwart captain, is calmly standing at the stove, heating up leftover navy bean soup.
She knows exactly what has happened.
She knows Salvador Santos is sitting in her room. She knows he intends to run away with Soares tonight, taking her away from Cliffhaven forever. And she knows intimately that Salvador has a lethal allergy to peanuts.
It's premeditated.
She deliberately, meticulously reaches into the cupboard, takes out a bottle of peanut oil, and laces the hot soup with it. She stirs it in. Then she turns around and hands him the bowl.
We have to sit with the agonizing slowness of what happens next.
Salvador takes a few bites, and then he realizes his body betrays him. He drops to his knees. The anaphylaxis sets in.
His throat begins to swell rapidly,
closing off his airway. He is suffocating. He is terrified. His eyes are bulging as he looks up at Florence, the woman who runs the house, silently begging her for an EpiPen, for an ambulance, for anything.
He tries to drag his body across the floor,
crawling toward the door to get to Soares. And what does Florence do? Does she panic? No. She calmly steps over him.
She just steps over him.
She picks up the fallen soup bowl from the floor. She walks over to the sink. She turns on the tap and meticulously washes a dishcloth. She stands there, wiping the counter, and simply watches a young man slowly, violently asphyxiate on her linoleum floor.
Like chilling.
She even has the chilling audacity to lean down and assure him in a soothing voice that, quote-unquote, it will all be over soon. I don't care how you frame her childhood trauma, this specific scene is the definitive proof. Florence is a calculating, remorseless monster.
But you have to.
She acts as judge, jury, and executioner. And why? Because she was protecting Soares? No. Simply because a member of the Help dared to try and take away her royalty. She was protecting her own vicarious place in the dynasty. She was protecting her property.
But think about it from her perspective. You have to view this brutal act through the lens of Florence's deeply twisted psychology. To Florence, this wasn't murder. This was a wartime necessity.
Wartime necessity? That's absurd.
She genuinely, at her core, believed she was saving Soares. Look at Salvador from Florence's point of view. He is an itinerant tutor with no money, no prospects, and no ability to protect a girl who has only ever known the insulated, highly medicalized walls of Cliffhaven.
So she kills him.
Florence believed that Salvador would drag Soares down into the exact same gritty, tubercular destitution that Florence herself had spent a lifetime clawing her way out of. Salvador wasn't just a boy in love. He was a mortal threat to the safety, the health, and the future of the girl. Florence considered her own daughter.
He was a threat to Florence's control.
She was acting under the primal, albeit corrupted logic of a mother protecting her cub from a predator. Yes, it is a horrific, violent, unforgivable act, but it is born of a desperate, suffocating love, not cold, calculated self-interest. She didn't do it to keep her job. She did it to keep her child.
But the irony is staggering. Florence is a member of the Help. She was born in the cellar, yet she becomes the most ruthless, violent enforcer of the exact class divide that oppresses her.
Internalized oppression.
She lethally polices the boundaries of the royalty, doing the dirty work the Towers family wouldn't even dare to do themselves. And look at how the outside world reacts to the aftermath of that night. This brings up a crucial piece of the 1980s cultural puzzle, the missing girl trope.
Right, how the media handles it.
When the sun comes up and Soares is discovered to be missing, the scene on the estate is grotesque. The party guests, severely hungover, still wearing their rumpled designer suits and disheveled, expensive party dresses, stumble out onto the wet sand of the private beach.
Literally holding half-empty champagne goblets.
As they form a makeshift search party, it starts as a surreal, macabre game to them. But when the reality sets in that the heiress is truly gone, the media descends like vultures.
News choppers hover endlessly over the estate.
Sensation-driven, breathless headlines dominate the national evening news. The culture demonstrates its absolute obsession with commodifying the tragedies of beautiful, wealthy young women. It becomes entertainment.
But what about the marginalized?
Exactly. Salvador Santos was violently murdered that same night. Florence drags his heavy, lifeless body under a bed, and eventually he is buried deep in the mud. He becomes an unidentified John Doe.
And his absence goes entirely unnoticed.
The media doesn't care about a missing tutor. The police don't launch massive search grids for a Hispanic kid from the working class. The culture entirely ignores the brutal death of the help while deeply fetishizing the mysterious disappearance of the royalty.
It is a devastating, crystal-clear indictment of whose lives society deems inherently valuable and whose lives are considered disposable.
It really is.
And all of this, the murder, the class divide, the lies, leads us directly to the climax on the cliffside, the rickety staircase.
Where it all comes apart.
Let's break down the exact sequence of events following the poisoning in the kitchen. Florence leaves Salvador's body to go find Saws. She finds the girl panicked, waiting for her lover.
And Florence delivers the final, fatal lie.
She tells Saws that Salvador has abandoned her, that he took a payoff from ransom and left into the night without even saying goodbye.
Which is just so incredibly cruel.
This lie, intended to sever the attachment and keep Saws at home, entirely breaks Saws' spirit. Remember the psychological void we talked about?
Yes, her belief that she's unlovable.
Believing that she is fundamentally unlovable, that the one person who truly saw her has abandoned her just like everyone else, Saws simply breaks. She runs out of the house blindly into the teeth of the violent storm.
She runs directly toward the dilapidated 5-story wooden staircase clinging to the cliff face.
The crushing, agonizing irony of fate is laid bare here. Florence committed murder to protect Saws from leaving. But in executing that murder, and in telling the lie to cover it up, Florence set in motion the exact panic that sent Saws running out into the fatal storm.
And there is profound ambiguity surrounding the actual fall. Did Saws slip on the wet, rotting timber in the dark, a victim of the violent environment? Or did she jump out of sheer, overwhelming despair, believing she was entirely, permanently alone in the world?
It's left ambiguous on purpose, I think.
But does it matter? Honestly, I ask you, the listener, does the technical distinction between an accidental slip and a deliberate suicide absolve anyone in this house?
Legally, maybe. Morally, no.
Florence's suffocating, lethal grip directly caused the panic. Her lie was the immediate catalyst. The family's history of control pushed the girl to the edge. Florence killed the girl she claimed to love with her own desperate need to control her.
And what does Florence do when she scrambles down those stairs and finds Saws' broken, lifeless body on the rocks?
She certainly doesn't scream for help.
Does she call the police? Does she call for an ambulance? No. She drags the body back up. And eventually she buries Saws in the deep footings of the east wing of the estate.
She covers her in lime and dirt.
She literally makes Saws the foundation of the decaying house. The heir to the entire dynasty becomes the literal bedrock, keeping the crumbling, rotting estate from sliding completely into the ocean.
It is the ultimate, incredibly tragic synthesis of the entire family's legacy. They bury their pain, they bury their secrets, and they literally bury their weakest, most vulnerable members to uphold the physical and political structure of the dynasty.
Which brings us to the final reckoning, the ultimate question of justice. Decades later, Detective Michael Church finally unravels the truth. He digs up the bones.
Church is a fascinating figure.
Because he is a man deeply haunted by his own past. He carries the heavy, paralyzing internal conflict of a wrongful conviction of the Peyton Riley case and the childhood trauma of failing to watch out for a young neighborhood boy named Bobby who was abducted and never found.
Church needs this investigation to mean something.
He desperately needs facts to restore order to a chaotic universe. And where does his relentless investigation end? It ends with a visit to Florence Talbot at Wasco State Prison.
She is an old, frail woman now, sitting in a stark concrete cell, staring blankly at a gray cinder block wall. She has traded the gilded, expansive cage of Cliffhaven for an iron one.
Is this justice? Is this the scales balancing?
Absolutely. It is the bare minimum of justice for a double homicide. She coldly poisoned a man, watched him choke to death, and then covered up the death of a young woman for 40 years, letting a family grieve a false hope.
You don't feel any pity for her?
A concrete cell is exactly where she belongs. The mechanics of the law function, albeit slowly, exactly as they are designed to function. She committed the crime, she pays the time.
But it is a profoundly hollow victory. Look at the wider picture. It fixes absolutely nothing. The true villains of the narrative, William Bass, the architects of the generational wealth machine, ransom towers who manipulated his sister, controlled the narrative, and built a political empire on her money, they escaped entirely unscathed.
They usually do.
They maintained their wealth, their elevated status, their shiny capes. Florence, the destitute orphan born in the freezing cellar, ultimately takes the complete fall for the sins of the entire toxic ecosystem. The system worked exactly as designed in the Trester, protected the wealthy, and incarcerated the help.
As we conclude this deep dive, we want to leave you with a lingering, deeply unsettling question, built entirely on the reality of the sources we've examined.
During that final prison visit, Florence Talbot makes a profound claim.
She claims that we do not truly die until the people who knew us, the people who actually loved us, are gone.
She carried the fierce memories of Doris, of Astrid, and of Swords in her mind for over half a century. She kept them alive in the dark.
But if the entire Towers family legacy was built on burying their weakest members in the foundations of their pristine public image, consider the physical reality of Cliffhaven, the erosion hasn't stopped.
No, it's still crumbling.
When that cliff inevitably succumbs to the violent California storms, when the foundation finally cracks and the estate crumbles, falling hundreds of feet into the churning Pacific Ocean, will the memory of Swords finally be free? Or will she simply be lost to the cold, crushing weight of the water forever?